Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome back to the show all the way down in Florida. How you doing today, Christy?
I am well, Steve. This is our third night in a row of recording, isn't it?
You know how I operate. We record a whole bunch of times in a row, and then I get cranky, and then we don't record for a couple of weeks.
Yes, listeners, that is exactly how it goes.
Exactly. So a little peek behind the curtain, and we're bringing back for a mini episode. We're going to discuss the differences between the classic ships and the Dream class ships. But we thought we'd bring one of our frequent guests back on the show. She's sailed on all of the different ships and has a vast experience sailing on all of them. Welcome back to the show. How you doing today, Sarah?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And no crankiness tonight, right?
No crankiness whatsoever.
No crankiness.
And you just got off the Magic just recently too, didn't you?
I know. I'm definitely not cranky right now. I may be cranky because I'm not on a Disney cruise ship, but yeah, very exciting.
So before we jump into some of the differences, I thought this was kind of cool. I just pulled out some geeky facts about each one of the ships, and I thought I'd throw them out here. So the Disney Magic had her initial voyage in 1998. She carries 2,700 passengers, has 875 staterooms and 950 crew, and it cost them, the Disney company, $400 million to make the Magic. The Wonder is comparable. They didn't have, what's funny? The Wonder, the Great White Whale, there's like no information on Wikipedia about the Wonder. There's like some general information, but all the rest of the ships have got like all this information. The poor Wonder is just kind of like the long lost ship of the Disney Cruise Line fleet. What do you guys think?
It's like the last one almost to get sailed by everybody, and you can't find any information. It's like they just don't even want you to care about the Wonder. Poor Wonder.
I know, that's the one we sailed on the most, which is funny. So how about you, Sarah? You sailed on the Wonder several times, right?
We actually have not sailed on the Wonder.
Oh.
To Christy's point, that's the ship we haven't sailed on. So yeah, we're supposed to be going on Alaska on the Wonder. So hopefully someday in the next year or so, we'll get to be there.
Okay. The Wonder doesn't come to Florida often, and Sarah does live in Florida. And so it just makes it that much more difficult to sail her.
Definitely a good point there. We'll talk about that itineraries. She definitely does not go to Florida very much anymore. Okay, so the Wonder is basically the same specifications. Then we move on to the Dream, which is 40, and the Fantasy. They're both 40% larger than the classic ships. They have about 4,000 passengers, 1,250 staterooms, 1,458 crew. The Disney Dream cost $900 million to make, and the Disney Fantasy, she sailed in January 26, 2011. The Disney Fantasy sailed on March 31st, 2012, and she cost $950 million. I could not find out any information on the Wish as far as how much it's going to cost, but it's slightly larger, 1,254 staterooms. So former staterooms, roughly the same passengers, crew's a little bit bigger. But what I think is different, and we've seen this across the whole cruise ship industry, is 75% of the cabins are veranda staterooms, 20% are ocean view, and only 10% inside staterooms. Kind of a geeky overview of these different ships. Okay, let's jump into it. I'm going to be a little bit of a referee tonight because I know that we've all got a lot of strong opinions or different opinions. We could probably talk all night on this, but we are going to try and touch on some different aspects of the classic versus the Dream class ships. And why don't we start with one of the biggest decisions people make when they get on, besides where they're going to go, but their stateroom. Sarah, you just got off the Magic. What are your thoughts between the staterooms on the classic versus the Dream class ships?
Yeah, so I think that's a huge decision, right? If you want a veranda, if you want aft or forward. For us, we love verandas on whether it's the Dream class or the classic ships, just because we think it gives a little bit more extra space in your room. It gives you a lot more to see, and again, another space that you can enjoy. But there's definitely a lot of options. I think, Christy mentioned before we were recording that the size on the classic ships is maybe a little bit bigger on those staterooms, which I think is really interesting. And we noticed that for sure on our most recent sailing. So I think if you prefer an inside versus a veranda, you're going to get what you want. You're going to get a great stateroom. And I think the differences between the different classes of ships is fairly comparable. Christy, what do you think on that?
To me, my memory, it's been a little while since I've been on a classic ship, but I remembered, just like you said before we started recording, those cabins are bigger. And I looked in my trusty little deck plan, and they are 27% bigger, not 27%, 27 square feet bigger on the classic ships. 27 square feet is a huge amount of space difference. And I remember distinctly, and I feel like this is on the Magic, where they had that like wooden cabinet that was a little bit taller with all the drawers, that it's just like, so there's more storage, and there's plenty of storage, honestly, on the Dream class ships, but there's more on the classic ships.
Sarah, you were talking before we started recording too. You noticed a difference in the bathrooms that you enjoyed better on the Magic, I believe.
Yeah, to Chrissy's point, I think they are slightly bigger, which is great. Whether you have a family or you're a couple, extra space is always, a great thing. But even the showers, we felt like the shower was maybe a little bit taller and a little bit wider, which was definitely great, especially if you have kiddos and you're giving them a bath, or you're a tall person and you like a little bit of that height in the bathroom. I think that's a really great thing. And to Christy's point, we felt like there was just a ton more storage in our stateroom versus the Dream class. And as Christy said, Dream class still has quite a bit of storage in it as well. So you're not going to be short on storage.
We really haven't had too many problems with storage on any of the ships. And I will say, just because the Magic and the Wonder are a little bit older, they have been through several dry docks. And so they have incorporated a lot more USB ports in the room. So it's not like you're going back to 1990s where you've got one plug in or anything like that. So they have updated both the Magic and Wonder as they've come along. Christy, do you have any other thoughts on the staterooms?
Well, what's interesting about that is now the Dream has not been updated in quite a while, and there are not plugs next to both sides of the bed. So it's like the newer ships weren't so old that they needed to be updated as quickly. And yet the technology now has advanced beyond them.
Okay, let's move into the second reason why a lot of people go on a cruise, and that's the itinerary. This is a really tough one to kind of compare the two of them because, unfortunately, the Dream and the Fantasy, at least for right now, have been continually ported out of Port Canaveral and in Florida. So some of their itineraries are a little bit more limited. We'll go with you, Sarah, first. What are your thoughts between the different itinerary options between the two classes of ships?
Yeah, I think it's so personal, right? We all have kind of decisions about whether it's geographic, locations we're interested in, or the duration. I think the Dream is a real great gateway for cruising if you want a shorter cruise, like a 3 or 4 day, versus some of the ships which are sailing longer ones. But I think the real advantage of the classic ones is they go to more interesting places, Alaska, Europe. And so you are going to get some of those more unique or more desirable locations versus your classic kind of Bahamian or Caribbean cruise. But if that's something you're looking for, the Dream class, I think, is a great one because you can pick any sort of duration and get a great itinerary out of it.
The Fantasy, especially, being able to go to the Western or the Eastern Caribbean and down sometimes into the Southern Caribbean in the summer, really offers some diversity in the itineraries. The Dream, which is what the Wish will become, is kind of like the workhorse of the fleet, just doing those back-to-back 3 and 4 days for people that are coming down to Walt Disney World and then wanting to spend some time on Disney Cruise Line while they're on their Florida vacation as well. Christy, do you have any thoughts on the itineraries between the classics or the Dream class ships?
Well, right now, when we're recording early February and the states in the north are getting pounded with snow and have like several days of snow in their future, the Fantasy and even the Dream are doing an amazing thing. They're getting people out into the beautiful blue skies and that Caribbean sea air. But for people that maybe can cruise those or live somewhere that is already a little bit more tropical in their nature, the Wonder and the Magic, like Sarah said, have those unique itineraries that really are specials. Those are bucket list type itineraries, whereas the ship might be more of the destination besides the warm weather or whatever, right? But the ship is more of the destination out of the Florida ports for the most part.
Yes, I agree with that for sure. And one of the things that I hope that's going to continue with the introduction of the Wish and any future ships is that they do keep some of those classic ships, even every once in a while, kind of in the Florida or East Coast region, so that people get an opportunity to sail on those ships too, because they're great options too. And we were just so delighted to be able to go out of Miami and sail on the Magic, when it's not normally here, it's only here a little bit of time.
I think that's a good point too. One of the big differences is just the size. We could talk about this here just for a second. I forgot how big the Dream and the Fantasy are because we've been on the Wonder. And then like we hadn't cruised for 2 years. Immediately we went on the Wonder out of San Diego. And then over Thanksgiving, we went on the Dream, and holy cow. Like when you walk in that main atrium area on the Dream and the Fantasy, it is so much bigger.
And similarly, Sarah, you were in last fall or summer, fall, you were on the Dream, and now you flipped to go on the Magic just a couple weeks ago. So that had to be a little bit of a culture shock, didn't it?
Yes, totally. We were both saying, Brandon, who's my significant other and cruised with me, we were both like, wow, we're here already. We made it to this side of the ship already. Oh, we're already here. Or we didn't have to walk the numerous amounts of stairs if we didn't want to, which on the Dream, you're definitely walking or taking those elevators. So yeah, the size is definitely a big shock. And I kind of love how small and intimate the classic ships were. It was kind of great.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely easier to get around, and you don't have to plan when you need to go, when you're in the front of the ship and you need to go all the way to the back of the ship to eat or something like that. You really got to get your kids, if you're traveling with kids, ready early to make that trek down there, because it's not easy to travel. Get the whole ship moving in the right direction to dinner sometimes, right, Christy?
Right. It takes longer than you're like, oh, I can just pop. No, there's no popping over to get to that. It's a little bit of a journey.
Yeah. The flip side is, having a bigger theater like on the Dream and the Fantasy, even though there's more people on there, we've never had a problem, coming last minute, getting some decent seats, but we have had that problem on the Magic before. If you don't show up, a couple of minutes ahead of time, 5 or 10 minutes ahead of time for like the bigger shows, sometimes it's been a little bit harder getting seats. Non-COVID periods, it's a little bit different right now.
I will definitely say, though, I have been on the Dream before where people have tried showing up maybe last minute for Beauty and the Beast and, not a seat to be had. So Definitely want to watch out for that during the regular times.
Okay, let's turn to restaurants. We'll just talk about the main restaurants first. Who wants to go first as far as your thoughts between the two different classes of ships with the main restaurants?
Well, to sort of Christy's point, I think the big thing that we noticed, having just gotten off the Magic and then recently sailed on the Dream a few months ago, because the Dream and the Fantasy haven't been updated as recently, those dry docks have really given, I think, the Magic and Wonder a real boost in the dining. The theme is incredible for Rapunzel's. Even Animator's Palette has been a bit refreshed on the Magic. And so I think they've really kind of evolved the dining there. So for me, I think the classic ships kind of have an edge because they're really kind of that dinner and a show and an experience. You still, of course, get that on the Dream class, but I think they've really kind of amped it up a little bit on those dry dock upgrades.
Yeah, they made the dining spaces sort of like what they're going to do for the Wish, where they're going to actually make like dinner shows. They sort of made the dining spaces purposeful for that goal of making the dinner shows. Like the Wonder has Tiana's Place, which I think almost everybody who's been on the Wonder and can compare it to the rest of the fleet agrees that that is the best restaurant for, I would say, entertainment and theming in the fleet.
I think that's something that they're really going to address once the Dream and the Fantasy finally go back to a bigger, longer dry dock. Is most people think that it's probably going to be Enchanted Garden that gets flipped into some type of dinner type of experience like they've done with Tiana's Place and whatnot. We will see what happens there. And I'm going to touch on the food just for a second, though, Christy. As far as the food differences go, with the themed restaurants, they do have some specialty differences there on the Wonder and the Magic. But overall, have you guys noticed a difference really between the overall quality of the food between the different ships or different ships?
No, I would say definitely not from my perspective. I think it's just every restaurant has its own unique style and flavor and type of food. But overall, I think the quality is really excellent in any restaurant on a Disney cruise ship.
It's hard to say right now in the current times because the ships are at reduced capacity. I think all of us that have cruised in the past and have cruised now, most of us at least feel that the food has sort of gone up a little bit, since it's gone up a notch since the previous days. Obviously, capacity is going to that's going to be part of the reason, right? If you have a third less or half the people that you're not feeding, but you're fully staffed, you're going to have more resources to get that food out. So it's hard to say. I think the smaller restaurants from the standpoint of capacity on the Wonder and the Magic, between that and maybe the less guest overall, give the feeling that maybe the dining is a little bit better on those ships. And I feel like that's a report that I've heard from guests coming back on those ships. Part of it is, again, because it's smaller, people felt like, or the cruises are longer, because when you're in Europe, you're there longer. And some of the, when you're on the Panama Canal cruise, you're with those guys for 14 days. You have a real bond with your crew that makes you like the food, I think, that much better, because the whole experience, right? So yeah, I think part of it is everything else that's going on. I also think it's the size of how many people they're feeding at that moment.
Yeah, some good points there. What is it? It's one kitchen on the Magic and the Wonder, one main kitchen for all three restaurants, and two on, I believe, or something like that. I
mean, maybe we should know this, but yeah, we should. I don't.
But I think it's something like that, like where it's one main kitchen that serves all three on the Magic and the Wonder, and there's two on the Dream and the Fantasy. I think that's right.
I think from an allergy standpoint, Sarah and I, because we both have what's deemed an allergy, ours is made in a separate kitchen typically anyway.
Sarah, I know that you and Brandon take an opportunity to go to the specialty dining restaurants. Obviously, the Dream and the Fantasy have two restaurants, with Remy's being the highest probably it is the highest, most quality restaurant in the fleet, versus the Magic and the Wonder, which only have Palo. What are your thoughts on that? And really, more importantly, what would you like to see in the future? I'm going to put you on the spot there with the wish. Would you like to see more specialty dining, more options, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So gosh, those are all really good questions. And so I think the first part, that main difference is on those classic ships, you're just getting Apollo as your only option. We did dinner and brunch on this most recent cruise and I had a great experience. I still would definitely recommend that for any adults who are interested in that on a cruise. Great quality. You're going to get a great experience. We do definitely like that the Dream class does have more of those adult finer dining opportunities, and something that maybe we don't get out at other places. We can kind of get a nice steakhouse or a nice Italian dinner someplace locally, but to be able to, at a more moderate price point, get to go to a really fine dining experience, very similar to Victoria and Albert, that I think is a huge benefit if that's something that you're interested in, or you want to give it a try and maybe it's more approachable to do on the Disney cruise ship. So I think those are kind of the big differences. In terms of what I would like to see, oh gosh, I am very excited about the two new restaurants that are coming on the Wish, Enchante and Apollo Steakhouse, the upgraded Palo, whatever that's going to look like. But I like the idea of having a little bit more options for adults only dining that give a little bit different flair. So maybe some of the newer ships having some different options, some different styles versus just classic French or a steakhouse, maybe some different things, maybe like a Japanese steakhouse or something fun like that, that would just be a little bit different.
So when we went on the breakaway with Norwegian Cruise Line, they had a cool little like space where they had sushi. And then it was kind of a ramen space. And so I feel like with the Disney ships with Palo and Remy, you're getting this like plus experience. I mean, it's a very fancy kind of, Remy's definitely formal. Palo is formal as well. I don't want to make it sound like it's totally stuffy or anything like that, but it was kind of a more like easygoing space, but yet kind of a different type of food that was not included. You had to pay for it. But I think that Disney could do something like that. You don't have to go over the top formal every time with the restaurants. Maybe some smaller spaces that give you some different food options, I guess.
Maybe something you don't need to have a dress code for, but can still be a plussed up dining experience.
Right. Something that maybe kids, although I know some kids who love sushis. Anyways, I think that to your point, Sarah, I think that they could do something like that. I'd love to see them do that. Will they do it? I don't know. Let's stick with entertainment here just real quick, since we're kind of talking about food and dining. Do you notice any differences as far as the entertainment options between the different cruise ships, between the classics and the Dream class, or do you think that you kind of get similar experiences across the fleet?
Yeah, to me, it feels very similar. I think the big noticeable difference is the size of the theaters, right? The size of some of the venues for entertainment. But overall, Tangled, fantastic on the Magic. Beauty and the Beast, great on the Dream. So I think you get these great Broadway style shows, even entertainment like wine tasting or adult beverage seminars, or even live music in any of the sort of public spaces. I think those are all really comparable across the different ship classes.
I would throw one thing out there. We finally did the champagne tasting in Pink on the Dream. Pink's on the Dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a really cool space. I'd never actually been in there before. And I think just like the ambiance of it really added to the experience of doing the champagne tasting, which I've always been kind of intimidated by. And we really enjoyed that. So I'm not sure where they do that on board the Magic and the Wonder, maybe up in Palo in the Meridian.
No,
it's not Meridian.
No, Keys. They did
Keys
for the,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I did the champagne tasting in the Cadillac lounge on the Wonder. So it just, I think, depends too on what space they have available. So somebody actually was just cruising this past week, and they did one of the wine, I believe it was the wine tasting, up on the Fantasy in the Outlook.
Oh, huh.
That's cool.
So, and that like specialty space that never opens up. But yeah, so I think that there are different spaces that the different cruise ships offer, but they're still uniquely, there's enough spaces that are uniquely themed per ship. So you still get like a cool, because like that Cadillac lounge really is kind of cool. Maybe not the place I would pick to go do a champagne tasting, but really the champagne spoke for itself, you know, so that the lounge wasn't that big a deal. But
after your 5 tastings, you were happy to be wherever you were.
Yeah. And I had my tasting and my husband's tasting because he literally tasted it and then I drank the rest. So, you know.
Well, let's stick with the adult spaces. Sarah, what are some of the differences that you've seen between the two classes of ships, or what are some of the places that you guys enjoy on? What are some of the spaces you enjoy on the Classic versus the Dream class ships?
A lot of the lounges and bars that we just mentioned, we love those. I think those are very comparable, just different themes across the different ships. So we tend to prefer the ones on the Dream class. We love Pink and Skyline on the Dream. We really loved Keys and even the Promenade Lounge on the Magic. So those are always a big one for us. Also, Cove Cafe, of course, is a huge one for us. I think the big difference is slightly different theme in terms of the decor and then the size on the different ships. But gosh, I don't care where I'm at on a Cove Cafe, what ship I'm on. That's a great day if I'm at a Cove Cafe. So that's always a great spot. And then the spas, I think, is another place. So Senses Spa is one area I think there is a pretty big noticeable difference, especially if you are interested in something like the Rainforest Room, which is really popular on the Dream class. We almost always have gotten a day pass for at least on the Dream to enjoy Rainforest Room. And that's great because it's got jacuzzis, it's got this great ocean view, it's got loungers and showers and, you know, all sorts of great stuff that you can enjoy. And on the classic ships, we found that to be a little bit more low key. So you don't get kind of there's limited options. So you're not getting the jacuzzis. Everything is enclosed, so you don't get those ocean views. And there's just less space in there as well. So in terms of return on investment for us, we tend to enjoy things like that on the Dream class versus the classic ships.
I feel like the pool is larger though, or the pool area is larger on the classic ships. Am I wrong? Am I thinking? Did you like, I don't know that you went to the pool, Sarah, but I know you walked by it. And Steve, do you know?
Are you talking about the
adult
pool
only,
or the adult pool?
Yeah, the adult only, the quiet.
It's bigger. It's definitely a little bit bigger. But I think the layout is different too, because you don't get like the satellite falls and stuff that you get on the Dream. So there's a little bit less reduced space, but the pool is definitely bigger.
I like the pool a little bit better on the classic ships because it is bigger. It doesn't have the where you can hang out in the water part of the bar, I guess, that the Dream and the Fantasy do, but the pool is a little bit bigger. I've never seen this on the Dream and the Fantasy, but a lot of times on the Wonder and the Magic in the afternoons, they'll have guitar players like down in the Mexican cruises. Will they have entertainment out there? Have you guys seen that?
They do. They have that on the Fantasy and the Dream as well.
Okay. Well, good there. Well, let's go back to the spa area too. I haven't done the spa. Onawake usually goes to the spa, but I usually the gym quite a bit. And I can agree with you on that the gym on the Dream and the Fantasy, part of that, it's just bigger and part of it's newer. But as far as the gym space goes and the machines and everything else that they have, if that's something you're interested in. The dream and the fantasy space is a lot nicer. It's just newer.
I think the view, though, on the classic ships in the gym is better because it's the whole front of the ship versus like, still windows, but on the side of the ship. So also to that end, if I remember correctly, weren't the treadmills like in the very middle? So at least it is not easy to run or even walk, frankly, on a moving ship. But you at least are straight out and like your treadmill is straight and facing. So it moving up and down, which is insane while you're trying to run. But when you're sideways, I feel like it's even that much worse because it's facing sideways and facing a window. I don't know. And you're on a moving ship. So I feel at least like the treadmills being all the way in the front is an advantage on the classic ships.
So how about you, Christy? How about the adult spaces that you enjoy back and forth between the two? Any differences that you and Dave use?
Not that I can remember.
I'm gonna go back and forth on this. I actually really
You've done most of the back and forth between the ships. So, and even most recently. So you are the best person to answer this question.
So I really like the adult I know it's the tube on the fantasy and I can't remember what it is on the dream, but the frontal space where a lot of times like the magicians or like buckets and boards will appear in the evenings. I like the theming in that space better than the ones they use on the Magic and the Wonder in the adult area. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
Like in the Magic and the Wonder, it feels like a cheesy 1970s sort of kind of nightclub to me. But that being said, I like the Cadillac Lounge and then also Keys on the Magic and Wonder, where they'll have like musicians at night either playing the pianos or singing and doing that type of stuff better than La Piazza or the District on the Dream and the Fantasy. And the only reason why I like it better is because it's got an individual space. It's well themed, and the La Piazza is themed, and so is the District a little bit, but it's got that walkway, and so people are always walking back and forth.
Right.
So I feel like I'm sitting there watching something, but people are always kind of coming and going, and so those are kind of some differences that I guess that we like, or between the two different ships. But going to the pool deck now, the one thing that I love about the Dream and the Fantasy that they do not have on the Magic and the Wonder is they've got the adult space with the pool, but if you go up and then they got the satellite falls, which for the adults too, but right in front of that first funnel is a small little area. Well, it's not small, it's fairly big. There's a lot of chairs where like when we're traveling with Andrew now that he wants to hang out with us, we can hang out with him there. And it's a lot quieter than hanging out in the main pool area where all the kids are watching Funnel Vision and stuff like that.
It's actually, when you're walking by, it's deemed the family zone. And it's like just before you get to the adult only space. But you're right. That area is like a hidden gem. And they have a little, at least on the fantasy, no, they have it on the dream too. This little tiny wading pool that there's almost nobody ever in. And so even as an adult, you can, and sometimes there's little kids or a family in there, but even as an adult, you can hop in there and just cool off and then hop out. There's no lifeguards back there. So you are responsible for watching your own family members, which in general, we probably should do anyway. But it is just this like little space. If you have littles they have to be potty trained still to go in there. So obviously, Steve, you're referring to bringing your older teenager into that area. And that's really great too, because it's quiet. You don't have the funnel vision, which is fun, but like blaring down you while you just kind of want to hang out and read. Also, if you have littles, that space is great because like I remember when we did a cruise with my nephew and then my son, I think my son was 5, my nephew would have been like 7. They could like play in there and play with their little toys. And they were like the only kids ever in this little tiny pool. So that area really it's a dream. It's
a hidden secret kind of. I think a lot of people don't know it's up there, and it's just a great place to spend time outside that's away from the crowds a little bit with kids. How about you, Sarah? What are some of the places around the pool? Any thoughts around the pool deck or pool amenities or anything like that between the ships?
Well, I can definitely concur. Go look for those hidden spots. I always feel like kind of those upper decks just above the pool deck is a real great hidden gem, just even if you want to sit and relax. Whoever's in your party, I think those are always really nice. We definitely took advantage of that on our cruise recently as well.
So one more difference on the outside decks, though, that is important is there is the mini golf on the Dream and the Fantasy, which is super adorable, very well themed, so cute. There's obviously no charge for it. And there really just is no space. There isn't. That option does not exist on the classic ships. And so to me, that's a big difference. That is something that we've done as a family several times on cruises. And on longer cruises, I think that's where, and Midship Detective Agency to that end, on the longer cruises, that is where the magic and the wonder might be lacking in a little entertainment. Like I remember specifically on my Panama Canal cruise that one of the sort of indoor activities that a person can do as a family was like a scavenger hunt for windows, or literally. And it was like on a piece of paper, and they gave it to you and they were like, where would you find this window? Look, that feels like entertainment from the 1990s. You know, it's an awful thing to make fun of. It's great that they've come up with something to entertain us with, but the Midship Detective Agency is, you know, leaps and bounds better. Having like mini golf is leaps and bounds better. So there's things like that. The slides. So the Wonder only has the little twist and spout slide. They don't have like a bigger outdoor water slide. So, which the other ships at least have. So I think those are some on the entertainment space. To that point, one more comment, the diapered area water space splash pad on the Dream class ships, so the Dream and the Fantasy, is far superior to that of the Magic and the Wonder. And that space is really important if you have a diapered child, because it's literally the only water space that a child with diapers can go in on a cruise. And that's like some US Coast Guard or some other regulation out there. There's somebody regulating that. And so it's not the cruise lines who've said diapered babies can't go in certain pools. It's this regulatory authority that says they can't because they have to be able to drain the water, blah, blah, blah. So the Dream class ships have a way better little splash pad.
Well, it seems like they're the perfect ships to be sailing out of Port Canaveral then and doing those Caribbean and the Bahamian sailings where you are spending a lot of time out there and utilizing those spaces versus Alaska, where you might be out doing a lot of port adventures in Europe as well. So any other thoughts about the ships, Sarah, that we haven't touched on?
Oh, this is kind of random, but something that we really love that we were thinking about on this most recent cruise, and especially some of the refurbishments that they have done, enhancements perhaps with the current state of things in the cruise restart. One, I love that the classic ships have so much real wood. The running deck, the promenade deck, I love all of that. I think it feels very authentic and of that classic ship time. So if you like that look and feel, I think that's something that's really special. And then the other thing that's an enhancement that we loved was the automation of hands-free opening of the doors, hands-free for the elevators. That was just a great upgrade that, having just gone on the Dream in August and now the Magic in January, we noticed that tremendously. I was like, this is so much nicer with the hands-free. So yeah, there's some nice updates that they've done on those classic ships, which I think are great features.
Christy, anything else about the ships? We're going to skip the kids clubs because I think that could be a whole separate episode in and of itself as far as the differences between them. There's not a lot of differences, but there's a few differences.
I mean, size, I think, is the major, but the kids clubs are amazing as a general rule on Disney Cruise Line. So I feel like unless you are a teen or a tween, right? The tween space is the one that didn't have any space. Then the space for everybody else is very well thought out. But
the tween space, I think they changed it because the tween space on the Wonder, so the Magic must have been the same, was like on deck 1 or deck 2. So it was like down in the basement. And I think they didn't want them going down there all by themselves or something. I don't know. I'm making that up. But they moved it up.
Yeah, moving it to the front of the ship too. Like, you know, when you're running on the running track on the Dream class ship and you're like, there's a little tiny area way in the front that you can, is it the front or the back? I don't know.
It's the front. It's the vibe.
Yeah. That you like take to get to the tween club. And I don't know, but what I was thinking when I was running around this thing a million times, one time on a cruise is,
oh no, I'm scared
is
where this is going.
Just making out there?
You never did go there.
You did know, but that is totally what I would have thought of when I was 16 years old or something on these cruises. But it's like this quiet, it's dark in the nighttime and nobody's going to be up there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they get their own pool out there with their own little cabana areas and everything else. It's like it's nicer than concierge, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, well, no pool and concierge.
No pool and concierge. Okay, so we'll talk about the kids clubs in another episode. Anything else about the ships for you, Christy, as far as the differences before we touch on our final subject?
No, not that I can think of right now.
Well, let's go to Castaway Cay. As far as in normal, we'll talk about it in normal times because right now it's such a different time as far as how many people are sailing in each one of the ships. What are the differences that you experience going to visit Castaway Cay, visiting it on the Magic or the Wonder versus the Dream and the Fantasy? I'll let you start, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm actually curious to hear what Christy says. So the big thing that we were actually talking about with some of the crew on this most recent sailing on the Magic was the ability to actually dock. So it was a little bit of rough waters on our sailing. January tends to be like that. And so, yeah, it's like January cruising, you're getting into that. But when we left Nassau, it was so windy, so turbulent. And then in the morning, we were talking to some crew and they're like, well, you're really lucky. Number one, we have really good weather today, but also that you're on a classic ship because it's easier for us to dock. If it's the Dream or the Fantasy, if it's a little bit rougher, it's actually going to be harder for them to successfully dock when weather is a little bit more inclement. So I thought that was a really interesting thing I'd never thought about before, but I think is a interesting and important point. If you're on a classic ship and you're sailing during those winter months, you may have a slightly better chance of docking.
That's
because point. I think January is the month where the most failed attempts at docking at Castaway Cay could occur.
And I think a lot of it's got to be because the ships are so much bigger. So they've got so much more space for the wind to hit. So it's that much trickier for the Dream and the Fantasy to dock versus the Magic and the Wonder at that time. Christy, what has been your experience as far as spending time on Castaway Cay with the different ship sizes?
The people. So during normal times, Castaway Cay on the classic ship sort of feels like the Dream and the Fantasy does now. Just like the family beach is so much more open and less chaotic. And, I love Castaway. You guys all know that. Right now, Castaway really is a dream because there's just so many less people going there. But it's sort of like that with the classic ships because that difference in passenger count makes a huge difference. The island size doesn't change. So you have to imagine that island that can fit double the people now has more space. And so you're only using the first couple of rows of those umbrella chairs unless you really want to be hiding in the back of the beach. And there's still chairs and umbrellas for everybody. There's plenty of space. It's just so much more open and like quieter when there's less people.
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up with that. I think there's I think the one thing that all three of us can agree on is that we would much rather be on a Disney ship right now rather than being at work or elsewhere, whether it's classic or Dream class. They're all beautiful ships.
And there's advantages to both, like we've discussed here. You had bigger room cabin sizes, or you have, bigger pool deck. There's advantages to both.
And if there's some advantages that you, the listeners, have taken advantage of that we didn't talk about, I mean, we just kind of scratched the surface here today with so many different topics. But if there's some things that you appreciate in the classic versus the Dream class ships, we would love to hear from you. And we'll definitely incorporate it in a future show to make sure that other people traveling get to experience that as well. At
a minimum, look for our social media post on Instagram and Facebook for this episode and comment with your differences. Because honestly, this is a show idea that we came up with because Sarah had just gotten back from the Magic. And I was like, we were thinking of mini-sode episodes. I don't know that either of us put, besides Steve, nerdy research at the beginning of the show, put a lot of effort into thinking of these differences. So I definitely want to hear now the listener, now that you can sit and listen and think about those differences, comment on our social media post and let us know what you think.
Definitely. And I'm going to let you have the last word, Sarah. You run an amazing blog for people with food allergies that are visiting Walt Disney World. And I think you touch on Disney Cruise Line as well. I'd like to let you give a shout out and let people know where they can find you and interact with you as you have food allergies, you have kids with food allergies, and you're thinking about, you're planning on traveling to Walt Disney World or with Disney Cruise Line anytime soon.
Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah, we have special dietary needs. So I'm gluten-free. We have food allergies in our family. So we definitely love to share that. We have a blog, and then we also have a YouTube channel where we highlight a lot of that. So if that's something you're interested in, come find us. We have lots of great info. We love connecting with other people who also have food allergies and love Disney and Disney Cruise Line. You can find us super easy. My blog and our YouTube channel is gluten-free and dairy-free at WDW. Or if you just Google gluten-free and Disney, chances are pretty high that you will find some of our stuff. So feel free to reach out. And of course, we have lots of social media accounts, so we're always accessible. And we have some new vlogs coming out for this most recent cruise. So if you are interested in seeing what it's like cruising right now, or even with special dietary needs, you can find us over at YouTube. And we have lots of hopefully really great information and fun stuff to share with people.
Yeah. And even if you don't have food restrictions or allergies, her vlogs right now on YouTube are showing what like the magic looked like. And first of all, how beautiful she looked, but then how kind of empty she was. And that is just nice to see too. So if you want to see what like the ship is looking like, they were also on the Dream last summer. So they have videos of that. You can check out that content. If you aren't looking for allergy information, it's still good content.
All right. Well, as we get out of here today, once again, thank you so much for coming back, Sarah. We always appreciate it. It was always fun to talk with you and connect with you and hear about your thoughts and experiences with Disney Cruise Line. And I love watching your vlogs as well over on YouTube. So thank you so much for coming back and being part of our show.
Thank you so much for having me. And now this is just an excuse to book another Disney cruise so I can come back and talk to you all again.
Well, whether you got a ship or not, we love talking to you, so we'll definitely have you back. All right, as we get out of here, thanks again for coming back and taking a listen, everybody, and we'll see you next time on the DCL podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Sarah for coming back on and helping Christy and I talk about the differences between the Dream Class and Magic Class ships. And once again, you can follow all of Sarah's stuff over at glutenfree, dairy-free, wdw.com. And she and her husband just got off the Disney Dream on a 3-day cruise, so make sure you go over and follow her there on Instagram as well to find out and follow along with their adventures. She's posted a lot of different pictures from that latest cruise as well. And if you have some differences that you appreciate between the two classes ships and want to comment, you can go over to our Facebook page. Just navigate over to DCL Podcast. Of course, you can always go to www.facebook.com/DCL Podcast. Look for the episode. Look for this episode post, and you can post all your thoughts about the different classes there. We sure would appreciate and look forward to seeing each and every one of your thoughts on that. If you've been enjoying this podcast and you know others who would enjoy it as well, we sure would appreciate it if you'd pass it along. That helps us get the word out in the Disney cruising, and just the Disney podcasting community in general. And if you have time to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review, that helps others find this podcast as well. As always, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters. They help bring this show to you each and every week ad-free. You can find out more information about our Patreon program by going to www.patreon.com/DCL Podcast, where you can find all the information there. Well, as we are heading into late spring and summer is just right around the corner, if you're heading down to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, sailing on Disney Cruise Line, heading out on Adventures by Disney, or just getting out there and ready for those virtual 5Ks this summer with Run Disney, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you to be well, enjoy time with family and friends, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.